3, 2, 1.
Salutations and welcome to Space Time Continues. My name is Mary Louise Davey, and let's get going to space.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Yet another.
So, Space Who? A primer on awesomeness. Okay, this episode's topic is born out of several conversations that I had on a recent business trip to LA. These people had never heard of SpaceX. I know, shocking, right? Well, from people who thought that NASA hadn't done anything since the shuttles, one actually asked if we still had a NASA. I mean, there's just, I thought my brain was going to explode. You know that purple thing? Well, anyway. Of course, I explained how cool SpaceX stuff was, such as the second stage and the first stage lands back on Earth, and explained that NASA does all this totally awesome stuff, from robotic missions, developing cool stuff to make water and air with a unit on a rover. It's planned for the moon. It's called Resolve. That's the regolith and environmental science and oxygen and lunar volatile extraction. Well, that's going to be used on the moon, and they can make some changes and use it on Mars. And, oh, dude, did you hear about the SLS, the new launch system? Or maybe the Orion, the new space capsule? Hint, we covered that a few weeks ago. But anyway, how SpaceX, Boeing, and Sierra Nevada would be taking people up to the ISS and perhaps civilians into lower orbit. Anyway, I decided we all needed to get on the same page. So, SpaceX was founded by this guy, Elon Musk, who also owns Tesla. They were the first privately funded company to put a payload into Earth orbit. That was about 2008. They have won contracts first with NASA, later private contracts, and the U.S. Air Force as well. Soon, they'll be starting to carry astronauts to the ISS. Two things. One about NASA using commercial companies to do their missions. It costs them less. You know, when you take stuff and you slap your tag on it and you send it up, it's more expensive than if you just let the lowest bidder or the medium bidder or however, whatever you choose as your criteria, take on up. So SpaceX can do it for insanely lower amounts. I mean, especially with that reusability feature. That's kind of key. Anyway, and 2, for those questions regarding those explosions, I'm speaking of the orbital ATK as well as SpaceX. I explained to you what should be obvious. Space is difficult. It's dangerous. There are many levels of moving pieces in the rocket, 10,000 or so, and I'll throw in different levels of atmosphere and weather and then thousands of other variables. Anyway, back to Elon Musk and SpaceX, which, FYI, stock's not public. I know. But it does make sense for Elon and the way they do business. Now, Elon Musk, he was born in 1971. He's a South African entrepreneur, has degrees in business and physics from the University of Pennsylvania. Musk has no formal training in rocketry, but if you were to ask him anything about rockets, he could probably name every component, what it does, how much it costs, who they get this from, who they get that from, although they do cut most of their own, most of their own pieces. He made his first fortune as co-founder of PayPal, also founded Tesla Motors and Solar City, solar energy company. Side note, I'm driving a Tesla, test driving a Tesla this weekend. I'll let you know how it goes. Anyway, in the early 2000s, he heard about how NASA was creating a void in space travel, and so 2002, he decided, I'm going to do that. I'm going to jump in and fill that gap. So, founding Space Exploration Technologies Corporation, or SpaceX, going into competition with more established companies like Boeing, Virginia-based Orbital Sciences. SpaceX really started in earnest about 2010. That's when he became the first private company to launch a payload into orbit and return to Earth intact. Something that previously had never been achieved by anybody other than, well, government agencies had done it. I mean, NASA and Roscosmos, Russia. So the returning to Earth and landing of the first stage of the Falcon rocket on December 21st, 2015 was, well, totally cool. It changed the face of launching rockets forever. Blue Origin, owned by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, recently did a similar thing. Now, some are going to tell you it's exactly the same thing. I mean, hey, they landed their first stage, but they went to the edge of space and then landed it upright. I mean, later, that was earlier this year, not fully into the atmosphere, not turning it around. It was a demonstration flight, so it hadn't achieved orbit. The Falcon 9 has a lot more thrust and energy behind it and when it's going into space too. So it's going further up, turning around, it's coming back down. It's a lot more difficult, so it's not the same thing. But hey, really cool. I'm glad you did that, Bezos. Anyway, so SpaceX rockets are modular. And the Falcon, the single engine model, the Falcon 9, what would you guess? Come on, go ahead, guess. 9. Now, if you guess 9, you won. How about the Falcon Heavy, which should be launching in the near future? Well, that's going to have 27 in 3 clusters of 9. Now, you know how an automobile is designed with similar features so the chassis can be, shared, just make slight changes and boom, this chassis is this chassis is this chassis. Well, it's that way with the Falcon Heavy. This works to streamline production in much the same way. SpaceX rockets, they make about 80% of their own products used in rockets, and this reduces the cost of outsourcing. Now, supposedly, I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure, but supposedly the Falcon 9 rocket price tag for going from the design stages of the Falcon 9 rocket to its first flight is $440 million. That's about a third of what it would cost NASA or pretty much anyone else. Now, I know what you're wondering about. How close are they to crewed missions? Well, very close. The company has used its Dragon spacecraft to make uncrewed cargo runs to the ISS. The Dragon was designed with crew compatibility in mind, which means the ship has already proven its basic space worthiness, though it has a way to go because it's got life support systems and things like that. They have to be proven as well. I mean, you wouldn't go up going, I'm not sure. So SpaceX and Boeing are both scheduled to begin crewed runs to the ISS sometime in 2018. And NASA's already designated its first astronauts who will fly the new ships. The 2018 date might change. We had the June explosion of one of SpaceX cargo rockets during launch. That didn't give them warm fuzzies. And the recent launch of the Falcon 9, even without the upright first stage landing, was a big confidence booster, kind of redeeming them. But with live astronauts on future flights, the company's going to have to put together a string of, launch after launch. It's kind of like the launches I show you week after week after week, the successful ones. Well, that'll make them feel warm fuzzies again. So, I can understand the worry, but still. So, what is the Dragon spacecraft like? Well, picture a 21st century Apollo spacecraft in your mind. Remember the history of the space shuttle that wasn't all that perfect? There was a loss of 2 7-people crews. SpaceX and other rocket companies, well, with the exception of Sierra Nevada, have returned to the old model of the upright, instead of just... So it's a crew perched on top of the stack. Dragon's configurable to seat up to 7 people, but it can and probably will carry less. Then there are the escape rockets, which are used to pull the ship away from the booster in event of a fire or possible explosion. Well, they don't mount them on a tower above the capsule as they were in the Apollo and the Mercury days. Now they're built into its base, pushing the capsule away instead of pulling it. Now, this is because the Dragon offers a cool feature, reusability. Could you imagine getting rid of that each time? But the spacecraft escape system is not disposable after each use. It can be cleaned up, checked out, configured for another flight. Because the company is privately held, its books aren't exactly open for inspection. But that means everybody can only guess, gee, are they profitable? What's going on? Well, analysts guess that by now they must be making money. It has $4.2 billion in contracts from NASA alone. Plenty of private customers, the Air Force. Its recent success in obtaining the defense contract business. They recently launched that spy plane X-37B. So if you're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of about 60 launches on its manifest, that means a worth of about $7 billion. That's a lot of sand dollars for a company whose main point is that it can launch for about a third of the cost. The older companies do, and it doesn't add so much litter to our space debris problem. There's a lot of curiosity and hope that Musk will go public. I know I'd buy stock, but if I were Musk, I wouldn't, because as soon as he goes public, he's got to answer to people. So keep it to yourself so you can do whatever you want, because you're doing great. I said before that space is difficult, a lot of risk. And perhaps you're saying, well, Mary Louise, what are you talking about? We have flights every day. How difficult could it be? Well, actually, ask yourself why we can fly a rocket. Really? We're doing a lot of difficult things. Think of it like an eggshell. Why doesn't it crack open? Why is the yolk, the people inside, the gooey insides, why are not they put all over everything? The Saturn V, the largest rocket ever built, weighed 6.5 million pounds at launch. That's 5.5 million of that's fuel. That's a little bit explosive, kind of like sitting on a bomb. Well, one that's designed to perform a controlled explosion. That's all it is. Well, theoretically. Basically, that's what you're doing. So when a rocket's launched, and even before that, just the engine's fired, in terms of chemistry and physics, speed and air resistance, all that unusually caustic. The trick is in controlling them to within very narrow endurances. That makes any launch successful. So to sum it up, things inevitably happen in the space. But if you don't try and stay in that game, you don't minimize those risks. So what's it all about, Elon? Well, Musk's ultimate goal is becoming the #1 in the rocket business for sure. Although, Musk might balk at that. Be honest, I think his biggest dream is sending people to Mars to colonize, and people all over have their opinion about it. I happen to agree that we need to be multiplanetary, but I'm betting he's going to achieve it regardless. If you're curious if Musk himself will go to Mars, allow me to quote him from a 2012 interview in a Time magazine. I would like to go to space, but I have to forego that. He said it is 5 sons and multiple companies. I have to be careful with personal risks. And certainly we could understand that. But he also said in a South by Southwest conference, I've said I wanted to die on Mars, he said, just not on impact. Well, it's all really interesting about SpaceX, and I haven't even scratched the surface of telling you things here, but I just wanted to put out a quick episode to give you a little primer on what it's all about. And if this is your first time paying attention to SpaceX or paying attention to any of these things, or even watching Space Time Continues, I hope not, but if it is, well, watch more launches, watch more things in the future, watch NASA television, you can find it on Facebook, they have the launches and things like that, or on SpaceX channel on YouTube, or the NASA channel on YouTube. Pay attention to what's going on, because these are really cool things, and these really awesome, wonderful things just are going to save our lives, you think? So, join us next time on Space Time Continues. And in the meantime, stay safe, watch lots of launches, maybe watch this one.